Hello once again from the Prim Reaper. Like I promised, I wanted to get this other one out quickly while the discussion was still fresh in everyone's minds. This video is going to build off the discussion in the previous video about the process of polarization and radicalization and give some tips and advice on how you can challenge that kind of thing in your own lives. Now, I think there are many ways to go about this, and I'm finding inspiration from all over the place, so forgive me if this video is a little bit piecemeal. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and break it down into sections, because the more I write about it, the more I am finding that there are categories regarding this process. So let's begin with the first one. I want to start off this section in a mildly humorous way by referencing a comment I received on the last video. As a quick aside, I'm really grateful for all of the comment participation, and I've been trying to be better about responding. So, in the previous video, I did try very hard to address both sides equally as much as was relevant, but regardless, I still had someone come on and comment that Prim is right-wing figures, as though this was an obvious fact and not something I have refuted many times on many of my previous videos. So let that be our very first lesson in this video. In any discussion, you can try and be as balanced as you want, and someone is going to come in and see what you have to say through their own political lens anyway, and make all kinds of assumptions about you. First, you want to learn how to take this kind of thing in stride. This is a very basic example of this, and this person may have meant any number of things by this statement, positive or negative. When you hear these kinds of assumptions about your views, you don't want to jump to defensiveness automatically. And that's the second and probably most important thing. How do you avoid becoming defensive? By feeling secure in your beliefs. I think that part of having that real sense of security in your beliefs is really knowing why you believe what you do. I'm going to come right out and say it. I think that focusing on an allegiance to a side, that is, I'm a left-winger, I'm a right-winger, I'm a conservative, liberal, etc., is more of a hindrance than a help in developing a real personal understanding of your own views. It's easy, it's lazy, and it's frequently inaccurate. Very rarely does the tapestry of one's political views land them neatly on a pinpoint on the political spectrum. In my experience, people often have beliefs that range across the spectrum depending on the topic. For example, someone might have more conservative spending views when it comes to healthcare, but they may be more liberal on their beliefs about abortion or drug use. Despite this, people still tend to phrase their arguments and viewpoints as being against the left or the right. Human brains really love simplicity, even to our own detriment. Whether we realize it or not, a polarized left-right dichotomy is comforting in a way because at a base level, it allows people to learn very quickly who is on their side and who is on the other side, who is a friend and who is the enemy, or even if not quite as strong as enemy, then at very least the misguided outsider. So by using simplified language and aligning yourself with a side in your everyday discussions, you may be cementing your mindset in this oversimplified view. Take some time, look at your views on things, do a bit of research to see which side of the political spectrum they fall on, or even what they have fallen on in the past, and also take some time to try to be apolitical for a moment and get personal with yourself and figure out your own reasons behind why you hold these beliefs. I'm not out to tell you your business, but if you want to protect yourself from even just a piece that I believe leads to polarization and radicalization, you should hold precisely 0 of your views because it's typical of my political side. Ideally, you should also take some time to research some opposing beliefs and some reasons why other people hold them. Better yet, talk directly to people who hold some of these different views. It's not always the easiest conversations to have, and I'll go into some ways to try to make this easier later on in the video. But I think it is so important to do this regularly to stop yourself from falling into that trap of beginning to view people as a one-dimensional caricature of the other side. The goal is not to change your mind, or even really to accept anyone else's views. It's to build that understanding, to develop some comfort and reduce anxiety in having those conversations, and to remind yourself that other people often have a lot of complexities behind the way that they think that don't just fall back to them standing on the red or the blue side of the fence. This one may take a number of forms, so I'll give you a few examples just so you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not just obvious examples like articles saying the truth about X subject that some ubiquitous they don't want you to hear, but it also includes anyone making some definite statement about a subject that appears more final than it deserves to be. So, for example, if someone makes a definite claim about the sky being blue or anything observably true, that is obviously not an issue. But if someone makes a statement like any of the following: the left-wing ideology is incompatible with insert any tenet of society here. The Conservative Party will result in the collapse of all social programs if they are elected. Members of X religion will always be at odds with our good moral values. You should always view it with a certain level of suspicion. Anyone who makes a definite claim like this is making that claim through their own personal lenses through which they view society, so chances are very good that they are not discussing whatever subject they are discussing with any real measure of objectivity, though they might believe that they are. In reality, they may be guilty of holding oversimplified views of the people they are speaking against, to the point of building up their argument against a straw man caricature of the opposing side. While writing this script, I was privy to two separate conversations that offer a good example of what I mean here. For the sake of brevity, I'm not going to read the entirety of both conversations, but we'll just get across the general point that each side made. On the one hand, left-wing MRAs are going to be an obstacle. And then in another separate conversation, I couldn't disagree more. Men's rights are incompatible with the right wing. Now, obviously the discussion in both of these separate conversations was much more detailed and engaging, but highlighting these two statements and putting them side by side provides a good example of how easy it is to have two definite statements like this contradict one another. These are easy statements to make, but they actually say very little other than to make assumptions about what constitute the right and the left and how they relate to a given topic. The problem is that it's rarely so simple. Not all people who consider themselves left-wing or right-wing agree equally on what exactly those terms mean, or the extent to which they agree with the ideals typical of those sides. But furthermore, these kinds of definite statements really just tend to rile people up and cause everyone involved to fall into the kind of oversimplifying behaviors I talked about in the previous section. Definite statements can sound far more authoritative than they really deserve, and should almost always be regarded with skepticism. This is actually something a number of you brought up in the comments of my last video, and I'm super grateful that you did, especially because I think that many of us in the men's issues, anti-SJW circles tend to be especially vulnerable to this. Essentially, this is when we seek out content from those we disagree with to research for papers, videos, or other discussions, when we want to keep up with what is going on in the world, when we're looking for entertainment, or whatever other reason we might be wanting to seek it out. I mean, let's be real, nobody, including us, is immune to the sense of enjoyment from finding content that supports their own personal biases. However, whatever the reason we might be seeking this content out, it is so important that we keep our heads in doing so. It can be deceptively easy to see a few people saying awful things like kill all men, all women are like that, or whatever else, and start to believe that these sentiments are common to all people who belong to a given ideology, rather than a few very loud crazies on the internet. Get in the habit of saying, this person is crazy, rather than, these people are crazy. It doesn't let that group off easy. It doesn't minimize the fact that this is an awful thing to say, or that there are facets of that belief system that lead to these more extreme thoughts in some people. What it does is prevent you from going into blind dismissal mode, and allows you to denounce the crazies while still being able to confront the other aspects of the ideology in a fairer manner. It's the difference, for example, between someone who says, I hate all feminists because they're all crazy man-haters, and someone who says, I dislike these specific elements of feminism for these specific reasons. One of my commenters shared an article with me that provides a really excellent discussion around exactly this kind of thing, and I will cite it in the low bar in case any of you want to take a look. It explores the use of hyperpartisan news sites versus traditional news use in people at various points on the political spectrum. Both people on the strong left and the strong right not only viewed hyperpartisan sites from their own political side more often than traditional news sites, but also viewed hyperpartisan sites from the other side more as well. Probably a fair bit of outrage chasing going on here, if I had to guess. Hyperpartisan sites were associated with increased effective involvement, which is probably not surprising based on the emotional manner in which these sites tend to address things. What these sites were not associated with was cognitive involvement, unlike traditional news sites. So we have here a great example where polarized people are viewing polarized news sites, which is leading to an increase in emotional reactions and a decrease in logical and rational thinking. Sounds like the perfect recipe for further polarization to me. I want to talk a little bit more about the quality of these emotional reactions before I move on to the next section. What I mean by that is that a lot of the time the emotionality in these hyperpartisan sites is very aggressive and conspiratorial. It all tends to be about how one side is out to get the other side in some way or another. The left in their open-door national policy is going to bring in all the immigrants to steal our jobs and our way of life. The right in their selfish ways are going to destroy our social safety nets and get people killed. It's all very extremist, and it is almost always based in fear. Fear of the other, fear of the destruction of one's way of life, and all that one holds dear. If you want a good example of this kind of thing, take a look at your average political advertisement. How often are those advertisements attacking the other side for the negative things they are doing or the ways they are destroying this country, instead of talking about all the things they themselves are planning to do if they get elected? It's not about trying to instill hope for the future. It's about trying to stoke fear and distrust. But you know what else it's good at doing? It's good at fueling the fire for outrage chasers to see just how bad all of those guys are, and to feel absolutely justified that they have chosen the correct side. This might not be quite so bad if the outrage chasers didn't only look to their political or ideological opponents to see all the ways they're screwing up, but you rarely see these folks taking a critical look at any shady business going on in their own backyard. To summarize my thoughts in this section, I'm not going to tell anyone not to outrage chase. It can be helpful in moderation to see the extremes sometimes, but if I can make a suggestion, look at the extremes all around. Recognize that there are extremes everywhere and that nobody is immune from that. Recognize also that the extremes do not reflect the average viewpoints of most individuals. Most people you meet might belong to groups that you disagree with, and you'd never even know it because they don't make that a large part of their identity. These people don't deserve to be treated the same way that you'd treat an extremist, so just don't do it. Lastly, whenever you're reading partisan news, do your best to supplement your reading diet with something more neutral as well. Even better than just reading non-partisan news is trying to take some time to read about something positive that is going on in the world. It doesn't have to be anything huge. Anything positive or hopeful or wholesome will do. A lot of polarization and radicalization feeds on negativity and discontent. If you starve them of their food source, I think you'll find it's a lot easier to avoid falling into that mode. This may seem like a bit of a change of pace, but I really think that a certain level of decorum in discussions can really do wonders not only in moderating your own behavior, but in encouraging others to moderate theirs as well. This may take a few different forms. First, and trust me, I know this isn't always easy, but politeness is a big one. I'm sure many of you have seen some Reddit or Twitter thread where someone is venting or beaking off in some way, and another person comes in and diffuses the situation with politeness, which either results in the original person responding in kind or simply not responding at all. and other people may pop in and comment on the wholesomeness of it all. I think that people in general are used to a certain low standard of behavior online, and so they tend to be more comfortable with acting like jerks, especially when it comes to high-octane topics. Oftentimes, this behavior is resistant to mere callouts. It's easy to tell people to go F off when they just come in swearing right back at them or telling them what to do. It's rarely so easy when you have someone coming into the discussion minding their manners and speaking kindly to you. It's almost like holding up a mirror to the other person. If someone continues to behave like a jackass when someone is behaving politely to them, if it doesn't cause them to start taking a harder look at the way they are acting, at very least it will show the other people watching the argument which person is being unreasonable. Similarly, acting in a non-defensive manner in these discussions, that is, not immediately jumping to attacks in the face of challenges, thanking the other person for their contributions to the discussion, granting them points if they legitimately say something you agree with. These are excellent ways to help diffuse a discussion and make the other person more willing to engage fairly with you. It's not a guarantee, of course, but many people respond positively to being treated like a legitimate discussion partner. Going even further, honest inquiry into the other person's position, that is, asking them with genuine interest about their position and sources, can be very helpful in two main ways. First, assuming you don't get someone who is going to give you the old, "it's not my job to educate you" line, people generally like talking about subjects they have a real interest or background in. Your discussion partner will likely appreciate your openness to their side of things. Second, as I mentioned earlier in the video, taking opportunities to learn other people's reasons for believing the way that they do will help you to refine and hone your own reasons for believing the way you do. You never know, you may even find you are willing to concede some of your own points. This is not a loss, it's a chance for growth and personal development. When people can start looking at these kinds of discussions as an opportunity in this way, rather than a dreaded conflict that strikes at their most cherished beliefs, you can start to become genuinely less defensive. In fact, I have found that these kinds of discussions have become exciting to me now. It's a treat to find someone who is willing to tell me the basis of their beliefs so that I can get to learn different motivations. Lastly, because this doesn't really fit in anywhere else, I really suggest wherever possible trying to talk to people in person, or to be COVID relevant on Zoom, instead of on social media. If you find you are regularly starting to be angry at the things your friends are posting online, I think you'll find if you try to talk to them in person, you'll find their tone to be quite different than it is in writing. This is just a small final section. You can really take it or leave it, but I think one of the best ways to avoid polarization is to try wherever possible to maintain an optimistic outlook on others. Stay with me on this one for a moment, because I know it's easy to put on the old misanthropy hat and talk about how much everyone sucks. Instead, I prefer to think of it this way. I think most, not all, but most people hold the beliefs they do either because they want to do the right thing, or at very least because they care about others in their life and want to do the best for them. I like to believe that most people are not acting out of pure selfishness. I'm not naive, I know this isn't always true, but believing that it is true most of the time really helps me to engage with other people in a more positive way. I think that if you can look at other people through a certain lens, you can really start to put a more positive spin on what they're doing. That person who preaches radical feminism and social justice, they were hurt when they were younger, and they're just trying to empower others so that they don't face the same hurt they did. That person who is afraid of vaccines, they're not educated in medicine, and whenever they try to ask people to explain certain ingredients or side effects, they get people dismissing them as stupid rather than taking the time to explain to them. That person who is homophobic, they legitimately believe that gay people are putting their souls at risk and don't want them to go to hell. I am against all of these example belief systems, and I'm not saying that any of these reasons justify any of these individuals' bad, exclusionary, or overgeneralizing behavior. but by trying to look at their motivations in a potentially positive light, it helps me to resist seeing them as someone with whom I have nothing in common, as someone with whom it is pointless to engage, as someone that can be dismissed or denigrated out of hand, as someone who is my enemy. I try to see as few people in the world as possible as an enemy. They exist, of course, but as much as possible, I try not to have it be because of their political or ideological views. I try to go into discussions hoping for the best. I may find myself disappointed at times, but rarely do I find myself regretting a discussion, or finding that it was a total waste of time that added nothing to my life. So I am certain that this is by no means an exhaustive list of things that people can do to try to resist polarization and radicalization, but I tried my best to include as many different strategies in this video as possible. A lot of it might not make for an easy change. Old habits can be very difficult to modify once you find yourself getting set in your ways. Honestly, I wish there was a course in school to teach people how to manage their emotions in discussions like this, and to learn to be open to new ideas without taking any challenges as a personal attack. I think it would do wonders to improve relations across the board. But, barring that, we have to come up with our own strategies to try to challenge it, and manage our own behavior, all the while not allowing other people's behavior to impact us too severely. It's not easy, but the effort is very, very worth it. Anyway, not to add an addendum onto an already long video, but the Canadian Centre for Men and Families in Alberta is dramatically beginning to spin up our services to include peer supports, domestic violence supports groups, legal webinars, and soon an official men's counseling program. We are doing our final push of the year to get people to help support our cause. I know that times are tough for people right now, but if you can spare even a little bit to the cause, your donations will be matched. In fact, new monthly donations are being matched 6 times over right now, so even just very small amounts will be helpful. Of course, I'm still donating a portion of my monthly proceeds to the cause as well, and anything you donate to my channel also contributes to that. So as always, supporting my channel supports the continued growth of men's services that actually treat men with dignity and respect. So I hope you'll consider helping. I'll include relevant links in the low bar below. But otherwise, I hope you stay well and safe during this hard holiday season. I'm wishing for the best for you all. Thank you so much for continuing to support this channel, and I hope to see you all in the next one.